You be the last one they drag out of here. You mark my word.
He's gonna do great things. You mark my word.
Mark my word. I guarantee there'll be peace and prosperity in our little town.
That goes for Emma May, Lucy May, Susan May. I don't give a May. You mark my word, Daisy.
Mark my word, it'll be a great friend to you, that finger. A great friend.
Listen, mark my word, Mr. Tyler. One day there'll be a wagon road all the way from St. Louis to Oregon. It's a new
Head of yours, you mark my word.
Without it, this neighborhood will fall. I guarantee it.
Mark my words, Marilla.
The girl will marry Quinn. Mark my words.
You mark my words, it'll happen before you can say Jack Gobbins.
You mark my words. You'll be back.
Mark my words, I'm going to steal you away from that fugitive from Malaga one way or another.
I'm telling you, B, mark my words.
You mark my words.
They'll burn for it. Mark my words.
Mark my words. This is a bad idea.
But mark my words. My day will come.
Mark my words, boy. Mark them well.
But mark my words.
Mark my words, Diane, Harlan, and the rest of you murderers. This isn't over.
Mark my words.
Huh. You mark my words.
You're gonna be hurt. You mark my words. I'm watching you.
Mark my words, he has done this to spite us.
Mark my words.
Mark my words. By the time he's 13, he'll be sniffing glue out of a plastic bag.
Thanks, Lillian.
Mark my words.
Because mark my words, that dragon is still out there.
We'll be in this fight, boys. You mark my words.
Mark my words.
But mark my words, it's the last time I shall ever do so. Is that clear?
Mark my words, brother.
Mark my words, in our lifetime, we will see men living on the moon.
This team must learn to work together or mark my words. It will be torn apart.
Hey, I'm telling you, mark my words.
Mark my words. Mark my words. You're gonna need my help.
But mark my words, Officer Spitz. I will not rest until I prove that you committed these murders.
Mark my words, ladies.
He's not a nice man. You mark my words.
Mark my words. And you know whose names are gonna be on the box? Ours.
Rosa Gomez is next. Mark my words.
You mark my words. You skinny, wonderful man.
Mark my words. It will not end up well for you, okay?
But mark my words, gentlemen. You're going down.
You heard it here. Uncle John walks. Mark my words.
You mark my words, you'll come around.
Mark my words, Mr. Resendez. If it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to abuse one.
And mark my words, by the time I get back, your picture will be finished. I know it.
And mark my words, Marcus Kane will not show you the same type of loyalty that you've shown him.
Well, this is our special trip, and no one's going to spoil it for us. You mark my words.
Mark my words. They're going to keep sending us in until the whole fucking division is gone.
The theater is bad enough. Now it's men blessed. You mark my words, young lady.
You mark my words, before we know where we are, we'll be overrun with them. Maple Terrace will become a suburb of Trinidad.
Mark my words, Corrigan. You're going to jail. You hear me?
I want to keep this one, thank you very much. But mark my words, I'm going to have that goddamn painting if it's the last thing I do.
They will ruin your life. You mark my words.
Mark my words, Masala. This is the poison.
Mark my words. Next thing they tell you, no coffee in your black and white.
This won't happen when I get my own ship, Denise. You mark my words.
Mark my words, I'll see him hung.
Hey, you won't always get in your own way. You mark my words.
Taste those waters, Master Gibbs. Mark my words.
There'll be mermaids upon us within the hour. You mark my words. And we're the bait.
He has his sights set on the steel industry. You mark my words.
Oh, mark my words, Lou. There's something creepy about that young man.
Mark my words, Francois. Sinister forces are at work.
You know, mark my words, 10 years from now, 80% of the young men of this country will be